So April, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
So I'm an attorney and a partner at April Glatt, which is in downtown San Mateo, and we do a variety of civil law, transactional, and civil litigation.
Can you tell us a little bit more about maybe some common reoccurring issues that you see that happen in our area?
We have a lot of issues that occur within the close of escrow period. So what happens a lot is you're excited, you've just purchased a home, and then the appraisal comes back and the square footage might be off a little bit. And so there's maybe a dispute or a negotiation or a renegotiation that has to happen at that time. Maybe you do an inspection and something happens and you need to do a renegotiation with regards to some of the information that came back, or a follow-up with regards to some contingencies. You may have to do an addendum to extend contingencies based on some things that you found. And there's some times where you have rent back issues and things where a tenant is previously in the property and doesn't want to move out. And those issues that arise create a lot of problems with sellers and buyers and whether or not to close escrow or not, and those are where the attorneys can come in and help figure out what the next steps should be.
Wow, so I mean, the real estate industry is pretty notoriously has low barriers to entry.
Yes.
So, you know, realtors most of the time, a lot of the time, are negotiating these things.
Yes.
But it sounds like there's a lot of value in them coming to a professional like you who specifically sees these things happening. And I mean, can you touch on that a little bit, like the value to a realtor to come to you and bring their clients to you?
So I'm not a realtor and I would not try to take your job.
Yeah.
But sometimes there are legal questions and, you know, are we filling out, did the purchase agreement really cover everything? So for instance, maybe you have 2 sets of washers and dryers and you just check the box fixtures on the purchase sale agreement. Does that mean you get them all, and when we come closer to close of escrow and the seller's moving out, the buyer expects to have both sets of washers and dryers? And for instance, the seller wants to take 1 set and thought was leaving 1 set. So those specificities there can help not only can create a dispute just to start, and then you need really a legal person to come in if the realtor can't negotiate out or create an addendum to fix those issues. But also, you know, filling out the purchase sale agreement really detailed can also help make sure that those disputes don't happen. But there are issues where, you know, it's above the realtor to give legal advice, and it's not a wise choice because there are options that can happen, and the realtor and a lawyer like you and I have worked together very much. It's a great opportunity to get together, put heads together and brainstorm and work collaboratively in order to get the best solution for your client.
Yeah, definitely. As far as dual agency goes, that's a big deal.
Yes.
And a lot of people, you know, realtors included, think that it should be illegal to do dual agency. Can you maybe tell us some common issues that you see that occur when dual agency?
As a lawyer, I think dual agency is just a no-win situation, frankly. I think that there is an incredible amount of problems and just an inherent conflict in that role just by virtue of the role itself. I think that being a dual agent, you have divided allegiances. And I think that's very difficult for you to represent the buyer and the seller at the same time. I think that it's okay if you bring in a partner, if you're bringing in the buyer and for instance you're selling a house and then there's another person to help with the negotiations. I know realtors don't love that because there's a commission split issue and things like that go on there. But it's a lot cheaper than litigation. You have to know your realtor. I think that's the most important thing. You need to interview your realtor, you have to know what they're going to offer, and you have to make sure that as a realtor that the disclosures are done properly and that you go through the disclosures as it relates to dual agency very specifically with your client before you proceed on.
And probably one of the main questions that a client should ask when interviewing their listing agent is, are you a dual agent? Would you be a dual agent, or would you exclusively represent me?
Right, and I think that's very important to establish those boundaries before. Sometimes, you know, a realtor's in a great situation that can bring a buyer in, especially possibly off market before it's on the MLS. or out to the public. And I think it's very important that those conversations happen. I think that dual agency can happen in a very controlled and transparent environment. But I think that it's more dangerous than not, and it's going to be a lot less of a headache for you to have an exclusive agent.
Got it. What are some maybe common things, preventative measures, suggestions, tips that you may have for first-time homebuyers?
In this market, especially in the San Francisco Bay Area, this market, people feel a lot of pressure, to, especially buyers, to put down that all cash, no contingencies offer. I think that in this market as well, there's a lot more as-is sales, and people aren't doing inspections. I think as a buyer, I think it's really important that you take a step back. There are other homes out there if you don't get that one. Think about what your financial capacity is, and think about really the age of the home and what you're getting with that home, and compare it to others. Do your research and get an inspection. I think the biggest issue I see with after a purchase or during a close of escrow period, another frequent issue I see is something comes back after the fact where they've done an as-is sale, all cash, no contingencies, and then the foundation's cracked or the roof leaks, or there's mold. That's happened a lot in this area where there's, in the San Francisco Bay Area, there's a lot of moisture and things, and there's hidden things that even after a close, people move in and they do some kind of remodel or an upgrade to the home, and they discover these things that were not discoverable before. And then we have a potential lawsuit on our hands. It's important to have that relationship as well, so that you can have the realtor talk to the sellers and things like that and try and figure out a solution.
Okay, excellent. How about, basically same question, but for a lot of people have lived in their homes for 30, 40 years. People don't sell homes a lot. Any suggestions or tips for like a, first time in a while home seller?
Don't jump at every offer just because it's a high cash offer. Look at making sure that sometimes the sellers jump into doing things because they see the price tag and they see the numbers. And on the same token as the buyer, the seller needs to make sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. Make sure that the purchase agreement is filled out really thoroughly. Make sure you understand the purchase agreement with your realtor, not only from the buyer side, but from the seller side. Don't leave it in the hands of your agent. Make sure your agent takes the time, and I know you do that, to take the time to explain what you're doing.
Are there any other questions that maybe you wish I asked, or anything else you want to talk about?
Just when in doubt, get together with your realtor. Should have an attorney to connect with.
Your mind.
Yeah, I'm always open to questions, and it's better to ask a question and be sure than to move forward and have a problem.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so
All right,
much for coming.
thanks.
I really appreciate it.
Okay.